She found him on a Tuesday. He found her years later. And the dog remembered everything in between. That is the short version. The long version involves a kennel in Shinjuku, a debt nobody agreed to owe, and one very large dog who decided, on his own terms, that he had already chosen his person. Not the man who owned him. Not the men who held his lead. Her, he chose her before either of them had a name for what that meant. She will tell you it was just the job. She will tell you she treated him because he was dying, and she was the veterinarian on duty. She will tell you it had nothing to do with anything else. She's not wrong. But she's not telling you the whole story either. Before we get into it, if you are new here, subscribe and hit the bell right now. You do not want to miss part 2 of this. And drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from tonight. We read every single one. Now, here is what happened. Yuki Ady had been working at the Shinjuku Animal Medical Center for 6 years when the dog arrived. 6 years on 12-hour shifts. 6 years of reading animals the way other people read faces. She could catch the shift in a dog's breathing before the dog could tell her what was wrong. She could feel, in the tension of a cat's shoulder muscle, the exact moment the animal decided to trust her. It was not a skill anyone taught her. It was the only skill, in 6 years, that the clinic's senior veterinarian had never once mentioned by name. His name was Dr. Matsumoto. He had been practicing for 35 years. In that time, he had developed a complete philosophy of who deserved credit. Yuki did not make that list. He called her Adeyemi-san exactly once, the day she was hired. After that, she was simply the assistant, or, when clients were present and he felt generous, my girl, which he said in English for reasons she had stopped trying to understand. She did not complain. Complaining required an audience. There was nobody at the Shinjuku Animal Medical Center who filled that role. The receptionist, a woman named Goto, had once said Dr. Matsumoto was old-fashioned. That was the most generous word available for a man who told a client, in front of Yuki, that the real veterinarian would be with him shortly. Yuki had been the only veterinarian in the building. She kept her face still. She had practiced that for 6 years too. The dog arrived on a Tuesday evening in March, carried by 2 men in suits that told her things. Not expensive the way wealthy clients were expensive. The kind announced itself, wanted to be seen. These suits were different. Quiet in the way that serious money is quiet. They did not announce anything. They arrived, and the room adjusted around them without knowing why. The dog was a Tosa Inu. He was enormous. His head was the size of a child's torso. His paws, even loose with whatever was wrong with him, covered the exam table like plates. He was breathing, just barely. His eyes were half open. She knew, before she touched him, that he was not fully present. He needs to be seen, the taller man said. Not a question. Bring him through, Yuki said. The doctor. A correction, not a request. She looked at him. Doctor, Matsumoto left 40 minutes ago. I am the veterinarian on duty. Bring him through. There was a pause. The 2 men looked at each other the way people do when they are deciding how much trouble a choice is worth. Then they brought the dog through. His name was Kuma. He had collapsed 3 hours ago. He had not eaten in 2 days. He had been given something. They were vague about what. By someone, vaguer still about who. Whatever it was, it had not agreed with him. She did not push on that. She was already working. Acute hepatic distress. She could see it in the yellowing at the edges of his eyes. She could feel it in the tightness of his abdomen when she pressed carefully. The texture of his gums told her the same story. She started fluids. She drew blood. She moved the way she always moved in crisis, without hurry, without hesitation, as if there was all the time in the world and she intended to use exactly the right amount of it. The two men stood against the wall and did not speak. "What did he eat?" she said. She said it to the room. She always asked aloud because speaking the question made her think more carefully. "We don't know," the shorter man said. "Has he had access to anything? Medications? Supplements? Plants?" A pause. "There was a garden. He got into it 2 days ago. We didn't think anything of it." "What's in the garden?" Longer pause. "Cycad palm." She stopped for 1 second. Then she kept moving. "Psychocin, cycad toxicity. Fast-acting hepatotoxin. He had been left for 2 days with it already in his system." "I need you to call your employer right now," she said. "Tell him this dog needs to stay here tonight. And tomorrow. And possibly the night after. And if he argues with that, the dog will die." She did not look up from Kuma while she said it. The taller man had his phone out before she finished. That was how Yuki Ady first heard the name Ryu Fujiwara. Not as a presence. As a name, spoken quietly on the other end of a phone call. "Fujiwara-san. The veterinarian says he needs to stay." And then the pause that happens when the person listening is not accustomed to being told what needs to happen. And then, "Yes, sir." The dog stayed. What she did not know, working alone in that exam room while Kuma's breathing slowly steadied under her hands, what she could not have known was that Ryu Fujiwara had not said yes to many things in the last 15 years. He had said yes to a small number of people. He had said yes to exactly 2 dogs. The first had died of old age 3 years before. Kuma was the second. And in the estimation of the men who worked closest to Fujiwara-san, Kuma was more family than most of the blood relatives. She did not know any of that. She was watching the dog breathe. By midnight, his color was better. By 2 in the morning, he accepted water. By 4, she had fallen asleep in the chair beside his kennel, her hand resting on the wire mesh. And Kuma, who had spent 3 days in a state of determined suffering, had pressed his enormous head against the inside of the mesh and stayed there. He was still there when she woke. She was at the back sink the next morning when Dr. Matsumoto arrived. He walked past Kuma's kennel without looking at it. He walked past Yuki without speaking. He found her note on his desk and came back to the doorway. "Who approved this admission?" he said. "I did." He was critical. Matsumoto looked at the note, then at Kuma, then at Yuki in the way that a man looks at something he has decided is an inconvenience. "These are not the kind of clients we want." She looked at him steadily. "He was dying." "That is not what I said. I know what you said." He left. She refilled Kuma's water. She did not need to know who the clients were. She had a dog with cycad poisoning and liver values that were moving in the right direction, and a water dish that was now empty because he was drinking, which was exactly what she wanted. That afternoon, something else happened, something she would not understand until much later. A man came in. Older, 70s. He had a dog, a small mixed breed, gray around the muzzle. He did not give a name at the front desk. He paid in cash. He sat in the corner of the waiting room and held the lead in both hands and did not look at anyone. Yuki took the case. The dog's name was Hana. She was 14. Her heart was failing in the slow, quiet way that old hearts fail. Yuki spent 40 minutes with them. She explained the diagnosis. She explained what you could do and what you could not. She asked the man if he had family he could call. He said he did not. She scheduled the follow-up. She walked him to the door. At the door, he bowed to her. Not a brief bow. A long one, the kind that said something specific, in a language she was still learning to read. She bowed back. That night she stayed an extra hour, writing up the Hana case notes in enough detail that anyone who saw the file would know exactly what the dog needed and why. She did it because the man had no one to call. She did it because the dog was 14 and deserved notes that were complete. You do things like that. You do them in the dark, when nobody is watching and nobody thanks you, and the file closes and the shift ends. You do them anyway. She drove home. She did not think about it anymore that night. 3 months later, the same man appeared at the front desk. He had a package. He put it on the counter. He said, to Goto, for Dr. Adeyemi. He left before Goto could say anything. The package was a set of handmade dog biscuits. Handmade, she could tell by the irregular shapes. There was a note. One line, Hana lived to see the spring. Thank you for the notes. She put the note in the drawer she kept for things like that. The drawer was not large. But it was not empty. The man arrived that afternoon. She heard him before she saw him, not his voice. The rhythm of the clinic on a Thursday afternoon going suddenly still. Goto at the front desk said nothing. The one client in the waiting room went quiet without being asked. And then footsteps in the corridor. Unhurried, even. The footsteps of a man who had never once needed to hurry to arrive first. Ryu Fujiwara was 52. He was not tall. He walked like someone who had never needed height to fill a room. Dark suit. No tie. His hands, held loosely at his sides, were the hands of a man who had done difficult things with them and was not troubled by the memory. He looked at Yuki the way people look when they find someone they did not expect. You're the one who treated him, he said. Yes, he held her gaze. Long, steady, how is he? Fujiwara said. Better, his liver values are improving. He needs 2 more days minimum. 3 if you want to be sure. Fujiwara looked past her toward the kennel row. Kuma was on his feet. He was pressing against the kennel door with the single-minded focus of an animal that had identified a problem, the distance between him and this person, and intended to resolve it. Fujiwara went to him. She watched. The man who had walked in like a change in weather crouched in front of the kennel door, and Kuma made a sound she had never heard before. Not a whine, not a bark. Something lower, sustained, the sound of an animal telling someone that the current distance was not acceptable. 2 more days, Fujiwara said. Not to her. Kuma pressed his nose through the wire. Fujiwara stood, he turned. What do you need from me? The front desk has the invoice. For your time. The night you stayed. She had not told anyone about the night she stayed. She had simply stayed. She had gone home in the morning and come back at noon. That's part of the job, she said. I would like to send something. To the clinic. That isn't necessary. I know, he said. And left. 3 days later, a set of ceramic tea bowls arrived. Old ones. Not antique store old. Old in the way you can feel in the weight of a thing. Old in the way of objects that have been held by careful hands for a long time. The box had no note. Goto put them on Yuki's desk and gave her a look that said several things without saying any of them. You know that kind of look. The one that means, something is happening here that I have opinions about and have chosen not to voice. The one that means, your life has taken a turn and I am watching it happen and I am reserving judgment. You have given that look. You have received it. Yuki looked at the bowls for a long time. Then she put them in her bag and took them home. Kuma came back once a month after that. Not because anything was wrong. Fujiwara brought him for what the appointment books listed as routine checkups, but which Yuki began to understand were something else. Same time each month. The same duration. Very little said. She said equally little. But Kuma. Kuma arrived each month and immediately found her. Not the clinic. Her. If she was in the back. He sat in the waiting area and did not acknowledge anyone else until she appeared. He tracked her the way dogs track something they have decided belongs to them, except that Kuma was not a dog who had decided she belonged to him. He was a dog who had decided he belonged to her, which is a different thing entirely. The taller man, whose name she learned was Ishida, started to look at her differently. Not suspiciously. Evaluatively, like someone trying to work out what the dog knew that he didn't. In the 5th month, the thing at the clinic happened. A woman came in. The kind of clothes designed to signal exactly how much they cost. A Pomeranian with a skin condition that was not serious and a personality that had not been discouraged. She spoke to Goto at the front desk in the specific voice some people use when they have decided the person in front of them is furniture. It was Yuki's turn. She took the case. She examined the Pomeranian. She explained the condition. She prescribed the treatment. She was halfway through the post-visit instructions when the woman said, "I'd like to speak with the real doctor." The waiting room heard that. "I am the doctor," Yuki said. "I mean the Japanese one." Goto had gone very still at the front desk. Yuki finished the instructions. She laid the prescription on the table. "This is the standard treatment. If you have concerns about the protocol, you're welcome to seek a second opinion. The number for the Veterinary Association is on our website." The woman left with the prescription and an expression she probably thought conveyed something. She was wrong about what it conveyed. It conveyed that she had been given exactly what she came for, and nothing more, which was the correct outcome. Dr. Matsumoto appeared from his office. He had been present and done nothing, which was, at this point, simply a Tuesday follows Monday fact about her working life. He looked at the prescription. He looked at Yuki. He said, "You should learn to read the room." She looked at him. "Some clients," he said carefully, "require a different approach." She picked up her clipboard and went to the next patient. What she did not see was Kuma, who was in the back waiting for his checkup, standing at full height, when the raised voice reached him. Ishida, who was holding the lead, said nothing. He noted the dog's position. He noted the direction Kuma was facing. You can learn a lot from watching what a dog decides to pay attention to. You can learn things about a room, about a situation, about a person, that the people in the room haven't figured out yet. Ishida knew this. He had worked for Fujiwara-san long enough to know that Kuma's attention was a data point worth recording. Ishida noted a lot of things. A week later, the woman with the Pomeranian filed a complaint with the Veterinary Association. Rude treatment from a foreign staff member. The association contacted the clinic. Matsumoto told Yuki he would handle it. He handled it by writing a response that described her as a junior technician who had overstepped her role. She found out from Goto, who slid a copy under the break room door with no note. She sat with it for 10 minutes. Then she put it in her bag next to the memory of the tea bowls and went back to work. That night she sat in her apartment for a long time. You do not always know, in the middle of something, that you are in the middle of it. You think you are still at the beginning. You think there is still the version of events where you simply do your job and go home and the world arranges itself into something manageable. She looked at the tea bowls on the shelf. They had been there for 7 months. She had used them twice. She had not bought them and she had not asked for them, and she did not fully understand why they were there except that a man who did not say things had sent them instead of saying the thing, and she had understood that, and she had taken them home. She understood him, she realized. Not fully. Not the parts that were still locked behind the careful stillness he moved through the world with, but the shape of him. The way he paid attention when most people in his position paid attention to nothing but themselves. The way he listened. The way the dog had been allowed to make his own decision, and Fujiwara had simply accepted it. She understood that. She looked at the complaint letter. She looked at the bowls. She thought, this is the choice. Not a dramatic one. Not a moment with an audience. This is the one that happens in a kitchen on a Thursday night, alone, where nobody is watching and nobody will ever know which way you went. She got up. She made tea in one of the old bowls. She drank it standing at the window, looking at the street below. She went to bed. She did not resign. She did not call anyone. She did not do anything dramatic. She simply showed up the next morning, and the morning after that, and she kept doing the job the way she had always done it, with the complete and patient attention of someone who understood that the thing you were tending might not show you what it needed for a long time, and your job was to be there when it did. The following month, Fujiwara arrived 20 minutes early. He stood at the front desk and said, "To Goto, is Dr. Adeyemi available?" It was the first time her name had been spoken as a title in that clinic. Goto came to find her with an expression that had moved past surprise into a different category entirely. Yuki went out. Fujiwara stood by the window. Kuma sat at his feet. When she came in, Fujiwara looked at her, and she had the same sensation she always had with this man, that he was very still in a way that had nothing to do with rest. "I heard what happened last month," he said. "It was nothing." It was not nothing. She looked at him. "It isn't your concern. Perhaps not." He did not argue it. He held her gaze instead. "I have a property in Mihiro. A garden. We would like someone to advise on what is safe to plant, given recent events with Kuma." She understood immediately what it was. An invented errand. One that gave her a legitimate invoice and gave the clinic a reason to value her presence, constructed with enough distance that she could pretend she hadn't understood. "I can recommend a specialist in animal-safe landscaping," she said. "I would prefer your recommendation." A pause. "I charge my consulting rate," she said. Of course, she went on a Saturday morning. The property was not what she had pictured. Not a compound. Not heavy-gated architecture built to be defended. A traditional house. Low and quiet. A garden running along two sides. A veranda looking out over a stone basin where water moves slowly in the cold. The kind of house cared for over generations. An old pine at the garden's center that had been shaped by long attention. Kuma found her at the gate. He came at a pace that was technically a walk, but covered the ground very quickly. He put his head directly under her hand. No hesitation. The way he had started doing at the clinic. "He hasn't done that since he came home," Ishida said, from a few feet back. He said it like someone recording a measurement. She spent 3 hours in the garden. She identified everything. She wrote a complete list. Safe, unsafe, conditional, and she gave Fujiwara a handwritten copy before she left. He walked her to the gate. Kuma walked with them. At the gate he said, "Stay for tea." She understood what was being offered. She understood several things at once about Ryu Fujiwara standing at that gate, and most of them pointed the same way. She stayed. He made the tea on the veranda with the ease of someone who had done it long enough to stop thinking about it. Kuma settled between them, not beside him. Between them, exactly between them, as if he had measured. Fujiwara said, the letter that Matsumoto sent. The association forwarded it. She went still. Your name was described incorrectly in it. She waited. I made a call, he said. I don't expect it will happen again. She set down the bowl. She looked at him directly. I didn't ask for that. I know you didn't. I am not something that needs managing. I know that too. The water moved in the basin. The garden was cold and still. She said, what do you want from this? He looked at her. Something in his face she had not expected, not certainty. Something quieter than that. I don't know yet, he said. She picked up the bowl. She drank. What she did not know, sitting on that veranda with the dog between them, was that Ryu Fujiwara had not sat still long enough to drink tea with another person in 4 years. His men knew it. Ishida, watching from the doorway, knew it. He filed it the way he filed everything about his employer. Carefully, without attaching expectations to what it might mean. She left in the early afternoon. At the gate, Kuma sat at her side and looked up at her. He'll be here, she told him. She didn't know why she said it. Kuma's tail moved once. She walked to the station. The second visit to the garden was in April. Fujiwara sent a message through Ishida, the follow-up on the plant assessment. She had questions about 2 species she had listed as conditional, safe in small quantities. Problematic if a large dog ate enough of them. She wanted to see the actual placement. She told herself that was why she went. Ishida met her at the gate. Kuma was already there. He had heard her coming. She did not ask how. The garden in April was different from the garden in late winter. Things had come up, small things, along the wall where she had flagged one of the conditional plants. Fujiwara was crouched at the base of the wall, pulling something by hand. He heard her and stood. I moved the azalea, he said. Potted it, kept it on the upper level where he can't reach. She looked at the place where the azalea had been. He had done a clean job of it. The soil was turned and fresh. You did it yourself, she said. Ishida offered. A pause. I wanted to do it. She looked at him. He held her gaze. He's my dog, he said. It sounded like it meant more than that. She crouched and examined where the roots had been. Clean work. Careful, the kind of care that tells you something about a person. You could have hired someone, she said. I know. They went through the rest of the conditional plants. She gave him updated notes. He listened the way she had noticed he always listened, not waiting for his turn to speak. Actually listening. After, they were on the veranda again, Kuma between them again. She said, without planning to, when I was in Osaka. Growing up, we had a dog. He looked at her. A mutt. Brown. My mother named her after a character in a novel. My father called her something else. She answered to both. She paused. She used to sleep outside my door, every night. I didn't know at the time that dogs don't always do that. I thought it was just what they did. Fujiwara was quiet. When I went to university, she stopped eating, Yuki said. Not completely. Enough to worry them. My mother called and told me, and I didn't know what to say. I said she'd be fine. She wasn't fine. She lasted about 8 months after I left. She picked up the tea bowl. She was not sure why she was telling him this. I think about her sometimes, she said. I think about the way she waited. You learn things from an animal that waits for you. About what it means to be worth waiting for. Kuma's ear moved. Fujiwara said, what was her name? The one your mother chose. She smiled. Small, Yoru, night. It was quiet a moment. And your father's name for her? Kabi mold? He looked at her. He was a practical man, she said. He laughed. It was a short sound. unexpected. It changed his face entirely, not the face of a careful man, for that 1 second. Something younger and unguarded, she noticed. She looked at her tea bowl and said nothing, and let the moment be what it was. She did not hear from Fujiwara for 2 weeks after that. Then a message through Ishida about a follow-up appointment. She scheduled it. He came. They went through the exam in the same quiet rhythm as always. But when she was writing up the notes, he said, "I'd like to bring someone to meet you." She looked up. "Who?" "My sister." She waited. "She has a dog. A Shiba. She's been looking for someone she trusts." Yuki looked at him for a moment. He offered nothing more, no persuasion, no performance, just the request made plainly. "She can call the clinic," Yuki said. "She will." The sister's name was May. She was 44. She arrived for her first appointment with a Shiba named Mochi, who was, in the clearest possible terms, running the show. Mochi went where he wanted. He tolerated examination the way certain politicians tolerate questions, with visible restraint and a clear awareness of his own importance. May watched Yuki handle him with the look of someone cataloging data. After the appointment, she said, "My brother told me you were good." He understates. He said very little. That's how he says things. She came back the following month. And the month after. She started asking Yuki questions that were not about Mochi, about the garden, about where Yuki had trained, about how she'd ended up in Shinjuku. She asked the way her brother watched, without hurry, without filling silence with her own noise, leaving room for the answer to arrive when it was ready. It was May who told her about the succession. They were in the waiting room after Mochi's appointment. May said, casually, "You know my brother has been managing the family's business interests for 20 years. Yuki waited. "There's a formal ceremony this year. He becomes officially the head of the family." She paused. "It's been complicated." Yuki said nothing. "He was adopted," May said, "when we were children. The previous head, our father, had no sons. My brother came from a branch of the family most people had forgotten existed. There are people who have spent 20 years arguing the adoption wasn't valid." She said it calmly, the way you describe weather. "They're wrong. But they're loud about being wrong." Yuki said, "Why are you telling me this?" May looked at her, something frank in her face. "Because he can't say it himself, and someone should. He has spent 20 years building something for a family that spent half of that time questioning whether he was really theirs. In 2 months there will be a formal gathering, everyone present, and either the question gets settled publicly, or it doesn't." Yuki absorbed that. "What does he need?" May smiled. "Small, specific. He needs what he's always needed. Someone who chose him." Yuki drove home that evening thinking about the dog, about the way Kuma had pressed his head against the kennel mesh and stayed through the night, about what it means when an animal decides, without asking permission, that you are its person. Not the owner, not the one who holds the lead, its person, the one who stayed. She thought about what it meant that Kuma had decided that about her. The ceremony was in June. Here is what you need to know before you watch what happens next. Because you have been with her for a year now. You have watched her stay when she could have left. You have watched her do the work without the credit. You have watched her make choices in small rooms where the only witness was a dog who pressed his head against a wired door. And if you have been paying attention, if you have let yourself feel what she felt, then what happens next is going to land differently than you expect. You think the story is about her proving something. You think it is about the room finally seeing what you already knew. And it is those things. But it is also about something smaller and harder. It is about whether a person who has never once been chosen, not by a family, not by a colleague, not by a clinic that put the wrong name on her door, whether that person can believe, when the choice is finally offered, that she is worth the choosing. That is the question, not whether she deserves it. She deserves it completely. You know that. She knows that. The question is whether she can let herself have it. Watch what she does. Yuki knew about the ceremony the way she knew most things in that period, through the shape of things rather than their names. Fujiwara had not invited her. He had not mentioned it. They kept their appointments. The garden consulting continued. Tea on the veranda had happened twice more, and neither time had they named what it was they were doing. In May, Ishida came to the clinic without an appointment. He stood at the front desk and asked if Dr. Adeyemi was available. Goto came to find her with an expression that had long since stopped being surprised by Fujiwara-related developments. Yuki went out. Ishida was exact. He said, "Fujiwara-san would like you to know that the ceremony is on the 15th of June. He would not ask you to come, but he wanted you to know when it was." She looked at him. "He sent you to tell me that?" "Yes, not to invite me." "No," she thought about it. "Why?" Ishida said very carefully. "Because he doesn't ask for things." She nodded slowly. The ceremony, at the house in Mihiro, 7 in the evening. Formal dress. She went back inside. She finished the rest of the day. She drove home. She stood in her kitchen a long time, looking at the tea bowls on the shelf. She went to the ceremony. She wore the dress from her graduation. Dark blue. Simple. Nothing that called attention to itself. She arrived at 7 and gave her name at the gate and watched something shift in the gate man's face when he heard it. Not recognition, exactly. Something adjacent to it. The house was full. She did not know most of the people. She stood near the garden. Kuma found her in 4 minutes. He came through the crowd with the directness of an animal that has concluded other people are not obstacles so much as things that move when you approach, and he sat beside her and stayed there. Your dog, if you have one, has done something like this. You walk into a room full of people and your dog ignores them all. Not rudely, just completely, because you are there, and the room is a room, and the math is simple. You are the room. Across the room, Fujiwara saw her. He did not come to her. The structure of the evening carried him, through greetings, through introductions, through the particular weight of a room where 20 years of something were being formally acknowledged. She watched him move through it, the economy of a man who had learned not to waste anything, who had spent 20 years building something for people who had spent half of that time questioning whether he belonged to it. But across the room, and then across the room again, he found her with his eyes. Every time. The ceremony gathered in the main room. Family by blood and family by oath, assembled in the formal weight of something that mattered. At the center of it, Fujiwara stood before everything he had built and carried. An older man spoke. He held authority the way he held his hands, lightly, absolutely. He spoke about the family. About inheritance. About the things passed down not in documents, but in the way a person carries themselves. Then another man stood. Mid-50s. The kind of face that has held a grievance long enough that the grievance has become part of the face. His name was Ogawa, a cousin of the previous head. Present, May had told her, at every significant moment of the past 20 years. Not because he was invited, but because he had never accepted that his position was decided. He spoke about lineage. He spoke about legitimacy. He spoke about the terms of the adoption, which he said were never properly formalized, which was not true, but which was the kind of claim that is expensive to argue with in a room full of people deciding which way to lean. The room went very quiet. Kuma, beside her, went completely still. And then Yuki walked forward. She had not planned the exact moment, but she had been planning something since she stood in her kitchen, looking at the tea bowls. Since May had said, someone who chose him. Since a dog had pressed his head against kennel mesh in the middle of the night and stayed there until morning. She walked through the room. People made space. She was not the kind of person rooms usually made space for. She knew that. She walked forward anyway. She stopped beside Fujiwara. The room watched her. She looked at Ogawa. The adoption was registered in the family records in October of 1989. The original documents are held at the family registrar in Meguro. The second filing, which corrected a clerical error in the initial registration, was completed in February of 1990. Both filings are valid under current family law. The question of legitimacy was settled in 1990. There is no question. A silence. Ogawa said, "Who are you?" "My name is Yuki Ady. I'm a veterinarian. I'm also someone who looked up the records, because someone should have said this out loud 20 years ago, and nobody did." The older man at the center of the room made a sound that was not quite a laugh. He looked at her the way she had sometimes been looked at by animals, with the attention of something that has decided a person is worth noticing. He said, "Well." A pause, and then he said Fujiwara's name. Not just the name with the full title, head of household, spoken in front of the assembled family for the first time. Ogawa sat down. The room exhaled. Fujiwara stood very still beside her. She did not look at him. Kuma pressed his head against her hand. The rest of the evening she remembered in pieces. But one moment she remembered exactly. It happened before she walked forward. Before she said anything. She was standing near the garden with Kuma at her side, and Ogawa was speaking. And the room was doing the thing rooms do when the outcome is uncertain, becoming very still, the way animals become still before weather. And she looked across the room at Fujiwara. He was not looking at her. He was looking straight ahead, in the direction of the older man, and his face was exactly what it always was, composed, present, giving nothing away. The face of a man who had learned, at 9 years old, in a house full of people deciding whether he counted, that you did not let them see what it cost you. You have seen that face. Maybe not on him specifically, but you have seen it. The face of someone who has been in a room deciding their value so many times that they have stopped expecting the room to decide correctly. They are not hopeful. They are not even afraid. They are simply there, absorbing whatever comes, the way you absorb a thing you have learned to absorb. She looked at him, and she thought, no. Not tonight, not in front of these people who had been wrong for 20 years and were about to be wrong again if nobody stopped them. She walked forward. Later, much later, in the garden after the house had emptied, he said to her, "I heard you from across the room." "I wasn't quiet," she said. "No," a pause. "You weren't." She was looking at the stone basin. "When I was at university, vet school, I had a professor, first year. He had a habit. When a student gave a wrong answer, he would simply continue as if the student had said nothing, not cruel, just absent, like the answer had not been worth registering. Fujiwara waited. "I gave a wrong answer once. About drug dosing." He continued. She paused. I gave the right answer the next question. He also continued. I realized, partway through that year, that the continuing was not about the answer. It was about me. He had decided I wasn't worth registering, and no answer I gave was going to change that, because he had made the decision before I opened my mouth. Kuma's tail moved against the veranda boards. What did you do? Fujiwara said. I kept answering. She looked at him. Correctly, every time. For 2 more years. I passed with the highest marks in the cohort. He wrote my reference letter. He addressed it to the wrong person. Fujiwara looked at her. I corrected it, she said. I walked into his office and I corrected it. And he apologized. He was embarrassed. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had never had to look closely enough to correct himself before. A silence. The point, she said, is that I stopped waiting for him to see me. I stopped needing him to. I just kept doing the work. Fujiwara was quiet for a long moment. Ogawa, she said. He's been waiting for 20 years for someone to see him. He needs the argument more than he needs to win it. You were never going to change his mind. You were always going to outlast him. Is that what tonight was? She thought about it. No, tonight was different. Tonight I didn't want him to win on a technicality of silence. She paused. He was wrong about you. Someone should have said so. In a room. Out loud. Fujiwara looked at the stone basin. He said, quietly, nobody has ever done that before. She did not answer. There was nothing to say to that was better than the silence. Kuma moved. He put his head on Fujiwara's knee. Fujiwara put his hand on the dog's head. He did not move the hand. They sat like that for a long time. May across the room, trying to keep her face composed and not entirely succeeding. Ishida near the door, doing what she had learned was his version of relief. He stopped watching everything quite so closely. The older man who came to speak with her quietly and confirmed, as the family's legal advisor, that she was not wrong about the records. She knew she wasn't wrong. But it was useful to have it said. And Fujiwara. Finally, when the room had thinned to the people who stay late, coming to stand beside her near the garden, he was quiet for a moment. She said, I looked up the records. I know, 2 years ago, after May told me. I looked them up and didn't know what to do with them. He was very still. I didn't come because you sent Ishida, she said. I came because I wanted to. He turned to look at her. She met his gaze. I know the difference, she said. Very quietly, so do I. Kuma lay down on the veranda between them. He put his chin on his paws. The garden was dark. The stone basin caught the light from the house. Fujiwara said, the dog chose you 8 months ago, before I understood what I was doing. Dogs do that, she said. He's never wrong. She looked at Kuma. His tail moved once. He was right about me too, Fujiwara said. There was a dog before Kuma. When my father, the man who adopted me, when he brought me into this house, the old dog was there. He sat with me that first night. He didn't know me. He sat with me anyway. A pause. I was 9 years old. I didn't understand what that meant at the time. She was quiet. I understand it now, he said. She understood too. The Oyabun bond was a parent-child bond. The organization was family by design and by choice. A man brought in from a forgotten branch, a woman who had never once in her life been inside a family that chose her, and a dog who had decided without being asked in the middle of a night in March that she was his. She said, "What do you want from this?" He said, "I want you to know where I live. I want you to know the gate code. I want Kuma to see you when he needs to see you." He paused. "I want to drink tea with you without it being an errand." She was quiet for a moment. "That's a careful list," she said. I'm a careful person, I noticed. She looked at the garden, the old pine in the dark. Tell me the gate code, she said. He told her. She did not move to the house in Mihiro. That is not what this story is. If you were expecting that ending, the one where she gives up her apartment, her work, her careful independence, and moves into his world, then you have been reading a different story. This story is about what happens when you are seen completely by someone who takes your full measure without asking you to be less of it. You don't give that up. You carry it forward, together and separately, and in all the configurations in between. She did not move to the house in Mihiro. She was at the house on Sundays. She had her own apartment, her own work. 6 years of learning that the thing an animal needed most from you was not your address, but your presence, fully given when it was given. She had a shelf with old tea bowls. She had a habit of staying through the night when something needed staying with. None of that required anyone else's house. But she was at the house on Sundays, and sometimes Wednesdays. And on the evenings when Kuma had a follow-up and the clinic was quiet, she would arrive after her shift, still in her work clothes, and Fujiwara would make tea on the veranda without being asked. Kuma arranged himself between them, every time, with the satisfaction of a dog who had designed the whole arrangement and was pleased with how it had come out. The thing at the clinic resolved itself the way things sometimes do when attention is paid from outside. Dr. Matsumoto retired in September. The retirement was not entirely voluntary. Goto told Yuki she had chosen not to investigate the specifics. Yuki did not investigate them either. The association withdrew the complaint in August. Again, no specifics were offered to her. She suspected the specifics were not the kind that would be explained to her. And she made peace with that, the way she made peace with the fact that Kuma sometimes vanished from the garden for 20 minutes and came back with mud on his paws and no information about where he'd been. Some things simply happened. The new head of the clinic offered her the senior veterinarian role in October. She had a week to decide. She used the week the way she always used time when she needed to think. She worked through it. She did the job. She watched the animals. She stayed late twice because 2 separate emergencies required it, and she was the one who stayed. On the last day, she drove past the Shinjuku Animal Medical Center from the outside. Just drove past it. She looked at the sign. She thought about 6 years. She thought about what 6 years had cost her, and what it had given her, and whether those things balanced. They didn't balance. That was not the right way to measure it. The right way to measure it was simpler. She was good at this. She was very good at it. She had been good at it since the first year. In a clinic that had done its careful best not to let her know that. She had a waiting room full of animals who would notice if she wasn't there. She had a man in Mihiro who had moved an azalea by hand. She had a dog who had made a decision in March and had not revised it once. She was not the person who had walked into this clinic 6 years ago, not knowing how to keep her face still, not knowing that she would need to. She was someone who had learned. She took the role. The first week, she hired a second junior veterinarian. Young, fresh out of training. Nervous in the particular way of someone who has been trained well, but has not yet understood that the training is only the beginning. She took the new hire through the clinic on her first day. She showed her everything. She showed her the intake form with the plant list. She showed her the filing system and how the notes were structured. She showed her the kennel area and how to read a dog's breathing before the dog could tell you what was wrong. At the end of the tour, the new hire said, "How long did it take you to learn all of this?" Yuki thought about it. 6 years, she said. And one Tuesday night in March, the new hire looked at her. "You'll know yours when it comes," Yuki said. "Pay attention." The new hire nodded with the serious expression of someone taking a note they don't yet fully understand. She would understand it. Yuki was certain of that. She went back to work. That is what the story keeps returning to. Not because work is all she is. It isn't. But because the work was where you could see her most clearly. The work was the thing nobody could argue with. The place where she was simply and undeniably excellent, where the results spoke in a language that did not require anyone's approval. Your work is like that too, if you're lucky. The thing that tells the truth about you when you don't have the words. She had that. And she kept doing it. She went back to work. The new head of the clinic offered her the senior veterinarian role in October. She had already told you that. But here is what you did not know yet. She accepted. The first thing she did was reorder the name card by the front door. Dr. Yuki Ady, Senior Veterinarian. Goto looked at it for a long moment, said nothing, adjusted it half a centimeter to the left. Yuki let her. The second thing she did was redesign the intake form. She added a thorough section on garden access and household plants, because the thing with Kuma had taught her that the questions you didn't ask were the gaps the emergencies came through. She added 8 specific toxic plants to the list. She made the section visible. She added a note in the space below. When in doubt, call. It was a practical thing. It was also the thing she could do. In December, Fujiwara brought her to the family dinner. He asked her 2 weeks in advance, not through Yoshida. He asked her himself on the veranda on a Wednesday, with Kuma between them the way Kuma was always between them. He said, "There is a family dinner in December. I would like you to come." She looked at him. As what? He looked at her for a moment. As yourself. She thought about that. She thought about what it meant to be invited as yourself, when most of the invitations in your life have been extended to a version of you, the qualified version, the useful version, the version that has been adjusted to be acceptable. To be invited as yourself was different. She had not been offered that often. "Yes," she said. "It will not be comfortable," he said. "Some of the family will be surprised. Ogawa will be there." "Yes," she picked up her tea. "Then they'll be surprised." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, you don't have to do this." "I know," she said. "That's why I want to." He nodded once. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. The dinner was at the house. Not as formal as the ceremony, that had been structured, ceremonial, each movement in its appointed place. This was a family dinner, which meant it was louder and warmer, and the specific warmth of a group of people who know each other too well to perform. She watched him in that room. She had watched him in the ceremony room, where he was composed and contained. Here, he was different. Here there were people who had known him since he was 9 years old, and he moved among them with an ease she had not seen before. Not relaxed, exactly. Present. A different quality of present. May found her early. She had a glass of something, and an expression that suggested she had been waiting. "He's nervous," May said. "He doesn't look nervous." "No, he doesn't." May sipped her drink. "He never does." "That's how you know." Yuki watched Fujiwara across the room. He was speaking with the older man, the family's senior voice. He listened with his full attention. He spoke briefly. The older man nodded. "He's been doing this for 20 years, May said, managing it, being careful, being enough." She paused. "He's never brought anyone here before." Yuki looked at her. "I mean that exactly the way it sounds," May said. Across the room, Ogawa arrived. He stood at the entrance and scanned the room. He found Yuki and his expression did something complex. She held his gaze steadily, the way she had learned to hold things she was not going to put down. He looked away first. May made a soft sound. "Interesting," she said. They went in for dinner. Fujiwara led her to her seat. She was placed beside him at the table, not at the end, not against the wall. Beside him. The specific positioning that means something. In a room where positioning means something. She sat down. Kuma, who had been following them both at a distance of approximately 2 feet for the last hour, settled under the table at her feet. The older man, at the head of the table, looked down at the dog and then at Yuki and made a sound that was definitely a laugh this time. The dinner was long. It was good. The food was careful. Someone had thought about it. She ate and she talked and she listened and she watched a family be itself, which was a complicated thing. The way all real things are complicated, full of the accumulated weight of 20 years of history and grievance and loyalty and love, all of it moving through the room like weather. Fujiwara, beside her, occasionally said things to her at a volume, for only her. Small observations. A note about the person across the table who had an interesting history with the older man. A quiet account of a dinner like this one, 15 years ago, that had ended with a broken ceramic and a very long silence. She told him about a family dinner from her own life. Her mother's family in Osaka when she was 12, when the aunts had all decided in the same weekend to form competing opinions about everything. The volume of it. The care beneath the volume. He listened. He asked a question about one of the aunts. She answered it. He laughed again, that same short, surprised sound she had heard on the veranda. She noticed that she was collecting those. The moments when his face went briefly unguarded. The moments when something underneath the careful surface became visible for a second and then was covered again. The way a fish rises and dips. She was collecting them the way she kept the drawer with the thank you notes. Not displaying them, just keeping them. In December, Fujiwara brought her to the family dinner. And when it was over and the house was quieter, he walked her to the gate. Kuma walked with them, the same as always. At the gate she turned. He looked at her. She said, "Next time, you don't have to tell me 2 weeks in advance." Something in his face. That movement. "Noted," he said. She walked to the station. He introduced her to the older man, the family's senior voice, who said he remembered her and looked at her the way you look at something you have decided to take seriously. He introduced her to May, who had been texting Yuki for 4 months and needed no introduction. He introduced her to Ishida, who shook her hand with the gravity of someone formally marking a record. Kuma attended the dinner in the way Kuma attended most things, by deciding he was present and making that impossible to argue with. At the end of the evening, when the house had gone quiet and they were on the veranda, Fujiwara said, "The family wants to know if you'll come to the New Year gathering. Will Kuma be there? Kuma goes everywhere." Then yes. He poured the tea. The water moved in the stone basin. The garden held the cold and the dark the way it had held every night for longer than either of them had been alive. She thought about a Tuesday in March. A dog on a table, breathing just barely. 2 men in expensive suits standing against the wall and watching. The specific quality of attention she gave to something she had decided to stay with. She thought about the kennel door. The mesh. The head pressed against it. You are not always the one who decides who needs you. Sometimes it is decided for you, in the middle of a night when no one is watching, and you wake up with your hand on a piece of wire and an enormous dog on the other side of it, and you understand, slowly, that the decision has already been made. And the question, the only real question, the one that follows you home and sits with you in the kitchen and looks at you from a shelf full of old bowls, is whether you are brave enough to keep what was given. She was. Some debts are not paid in money. Some choices are made in the dark, in small rooms, before anyone knows what they cost. And the ones made that way, without audience, without certainty, without anyone watching, are the only ones that last. The quiet ones always know this. They are quiet because they are paying attention. They are paying attention because they know that the moment you stop looking, the thing worth seeing walks past you. She stopped looking at the garden. She looked at the dog asleep between them. She looked at the man who had waited, carefully and patiently, for someone to stay. She looked at what it meant to be chosen. Never underestimate the ones who stayed. If you made it to the end, drop a comment right now and tell us the moment that made you stop scrolling. And if you want to know what happened at the New Year gathering, what Ogawa did when he walked in and found Yuki already seated at the family table, let us know below, and we will do part 2. Share this with someone tonight who needs to hear it.